Hey, everybody, this episode of On Deck is brought to you by Into the AM. For information on how you can save 10% on cool t shirts like this, stick around. Let's get started today, though, Lloyd, with On
Mm.
Deck, episode 6. I'm Bill. That's Lloyd. What's going on, Lloyd?
I had to shift to two hands now. I can't just hold up fingers anymore. Not much, man. It's Friday. It's been a heck of a week. I'm looking forward to the weekend. And playing some games, some Steam games of all things. I wish I had a Steam Deck right now because I'd be playing them on that device.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who this is your first time checking out this show is all about the Steam Deck. We are both very, very excited because we like games that are convenient. We like things to be convenient. We like that kind of thing, and being able to pick up your Steam Deck and play games wherever you are, and
Mm.
then when you get home, plug it in and play it on the TV. That is very, very compelling, and I think it's compelling to a lot of people, as is I guess justified by all of the people who've been watching the show. So if you're one of those people who've watched all of them, then thank you very much. And if you're not, make sure that you click on subscribe and all of the other YouTube buttons before we get started. Are you ready to talk about some video game stuff, Lloyd?
Yeah, I think so. I think we can get into some kind of like tech conversations. Maybe talk about some questions and other things. I have a good feeling about those things, Bill.
Yeah, let's talk about some comments that everybody left. But first, this episode is sponsored by Into the AM. Hey man, what are you doing? I'm just editing the latest episode of On Deck. Timing couldn't be better. Sponsorship shirts just came in. Try this on. Thanks. One of the things I can't stand about t-shirts is how they give you these little wings unless you have massive giant arms, which I don't have. Into the AM makes soft, comfortable, and well-fitted t-shirts, both with graphic designs or understated branded basics as well. You can even sign up for the t-shirt club, where every month they send you a brand new design and you can pause or cancel anytime. So if you're looking for t-shirts with unique designs, superior fit, and quality, head on over to intotheam.com/nerdnest or click on the link in the description below. Again, that URL is intotheam.com/nerdnest. Use the link below for 10% off your order. All right, we're back, and let's talk about the comments. You all have been leaving a bunch of comments on these episodes, and we really, really do appreciate it. If there's anything that you think of while you're watching this show, then please feel free to leave the comment right down below the like button. Let's start with a comment from Felix EN. They said, do you think the Steam Deck will be suitable for casual RTS gaming? I see some potential with the trackpads and many trigger buttons on the back. Well, what do you guys reckon? So Lloyd, I have the advantage of, it's on the wall over there. I have the advantage of having a Steam controller, so I've actually had a chance to mess around with that.
Mhm.
Are you an RTS guy?
I am. I way in the past I was. I loved games like Dune 2 and Command and Conquer and like kind of old school like Warcraft, all those old school games. I love those things. And if you would have asked me before we started the show, could the Steam Deck do well with that? I'd be like, you're kidding. Not unless you plug a mouse in the top, crazy. But then I saw your video on what you did with the Steam controller, and you could have one of the touchpads acts like a joystick, and the other one acts like a mouse. The other one acts like a trackpad. One acts like a trackball. Obviously, there's only two, so you'd have to swap them back and forth with the copious amount of triggers on the back. You could have them as kind of like a switch, so you could switch modes and things like that. You could for sure play any RTS on this device with just a little bit of training. Quick story on that before I let Bill jump in and tell me how much I need to try a Steam controller. A friend at work, when a past job that I had, he played everything with one of those mice that was like a trackball. So his hand was like sideways, and you'd have the ball on the top, and it had like the 4 buttons and things like that. And you read forums and they say, no way can you play first-person shooters with one of those things. He was one of the best first-person shooters players I've ever seen. I think there's going to be just comparable levels of awesome with people that have gotten their Steam Deck, gotten really good with their Steam Deck, and now are masters at playing games on this device.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Back, I don't remember when, but there was a time where I lived with a roommate of mine. His name is Ken. Hey, Ken, if you're watching this. And he got me to try first person shooters with a trackball. And it was really, really good. The ability for you to just take your fingers and flick the trackball and have the character spin around really fast and then stop on a dime by putting your hand down
Yeah.
was really good. And you never ran into that issue where, and this happens to me all the time, especially because I've got like this big honking keyboard with a number pad on the side, which I know is not what a lot of gamers use, but a lot of times I'll be playing a game and my mouse will hit the keyboard because like the keyboard's so big because I like a
Right.
big chunky keyboard. So like trackball gaming is absolutely something you can do, and it just goes to show you that you can learn to play games anyway if you're determined enough.
Sure.
And when you jump on the Steam Deck, there are, I mean, the key word here from Felix is casual RTS gaming. I do think that that's definitely a possibility. In fact, didn't I'm blanking on his name right now. Head of Xbox, Phil
Spencer. Yeah.
Spencer, yeah, Phil Spencer tweeted out because he had his hands on a Steam Deck. He tweeted out that he played Age 4. I assume that means Age of Empires 4,
Yep.
which is an RTS. So I think, Felix, I think the answer is yes.
I definitely agree with you there, Bill. And like you said, we can learn to use any sort of controls. Just like when the NES came out, we learned how to use D-pads when we just had joysticks before that you'd move around by craning your wrist left, right, up, and down. We learned how to use analog sticks when the N64 came out. We learned how to use shoulder buttons when the Super Nintendo came out. All things that people looked at and said, that's too confusing. Now it's commonplace. We're going to be able to learn how to use this device and just unlock its full capacity for awesome just after using it for a month or so. I'm sure everybody will be used to the different control options on the Steam Deck.
Especially because it's super customizable. And you have to keep in mind that, I keep talking about the Steam controller, which is awesome. That only has 2 buttons on the back, and the Steam Deck has 4
Mhm.
buttons on the back. So that's going to be even better. All right, let's move on to the next comment. This one comes from Project Aeroid. Hopefully I said that right, Project. Thank you very much for the comment. They said, cool discussion on the Steam Deck. How do you think the Steam Deck could work as an occasional creative creation PC? Would it be usable for 3D rendering, photo creation, and or video editing using a mouse, keyboard, and monitor? I mean, look, both Lloyd and I do a lot of creative stuff on our computers.
Yeah.
I think it depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Some things are going to require a lot more GPU. Some things are going to require more CPU, and we don't know quite what the real world situation is going to be when it comes to using this outside of gaming. We do have some benchmark information, by the way, for the way that some games are working
Yeah.
on the Steam Deck. Stick around for that. We'll talk more about that later. But what do you think, Lloyd? Do you think it's possible for people to sit down and do 3D rendering and things like video editing on this thing?
I definitely think so. It all depends how you're planning to use the device. Are you installing Windows on it and installing Photoshop and Creative Cloud? Or are you going to use Linux? Just what comes with it, boot into the desktop mode by getting the nice Steam Deck dock or finding one of your own and plugging into HDMI at a 4K resolution. There's definitely the option there because it'll run pretty much anything. It's one of the more versatile computers out there where it can run Windows, it can run Linux. I'm sure there's going to be people that try to find somebody to run OS 10 on it through some crazy crazy boot images and hack and all that stuff. You'll be able to run pretty much any software on it. It looks like it's going to be a beefy PC. Where you're going to be limited is the GPU. So things like video editing. The rendering out of the video might take a little bit longer on this device than, say, a desktop of similar specs, just because your desktop can ramp up your GPU to the full wattage that your power supply will support, where it's under 20 watts on the Steam Deck. So that'll have some issues there, but you're taking your PC with you, and it's not a laptop, and you can play games on it. So there's going to have to be kind of a balancing thing that you're going to do with this device.
Absolutely. And there's always people who look at devices like this and they say, is there ways that I can use it beyond just playing a game on it?
Yeah,
Because then I can have a device which is used for a lot of things. And
right.
a lot of people like to have things that are the word devices where you use it for this and you use it for this and you use it for this, which leads us into this next comment from Skits. They said, I'm curious about how viable the deck will be while docked with a TV. Do I have to worry about melting the deck if I want to watch a 4K movie while it's docked? I understand that playing games in 4K isn't viable, and I'm super fine with that. But gaming isn't all that I want to do with my computer.
Right.
So, I mean, look, Lloyd and I have another show called StadiaCast, and on StadiaCast we talked a lot about this thing called the Chromecast Ultra, which is this incredibly cheap, um, really, really low power device, which will allow you to watch 4K video on your PC. And then they brought out an even cheaper version that came with a remote for like $50. It's called Google TV. And this thing can you have no issues at all watching 4K. Do you think that there's any issues watching like a 4K show
Yeah.
on Netflix or whatever?
Definitely not. I can't see any issues at all. You put it into desktop mode, outputs at 4K. Catching a stream is very light on your
Yeah.
CPU and GPU, so that's not a problem. I'm sure if you have like a 4K MKV file loaded off of like a USB drive and you're trying to watch that, I'm sure that will be fine too. The bus seems to be fast enough, and there's plenty of headroom in the GPU for just playing back a 4K video. I don't see any issues with that at all.
I agree 100%. And then they follow up and they say, I'm also curious about using other gaming apps like Game Pass or Twitch Prime. Which will those be compatible without having to install Windows?
Yes.
As far as Game Pass, I would say yes, with a caveat of being able to play the games in the cloud. So for those of you who don't know, Microsoft has this thing called Xbox Cloud Gaming, where if you subscribe to Game Pass, it kind of comes with it and you can try it out. It's in early stages. It doesn't work nearly as well as some of the other, for me, as some of the other cloud gaming applications. But they're going to get better at that over time,
Yeah.
and eventually, you're going to be able to play those games on your Steam Deck without installing Windows. Now, Twitch Prime, I don't know. I suppose that depends on the particular game.
Yeah.
And there's a question that we'll get to in a little bit about whether or not you have to be launching things through Steam in order to take advantage of Proton. So stick around for that. But what do you think about Game Pass and Twitch Prime? Do you think I kind of nailed it, or is there anything else that I'm not thinking of?
The cloud stuff, obviously, that's going to be easy. That's just catching a stream. There's going to be a standards compliant browser shipping on this device. If it's not as compliant as you want, you can install whatever the heck you want on that device. But we also know that you'll be able to install things like the Epic Games Store. I wouldn't be surprised if you can get Game Pass running and do a local install of those Windows apps, and then they run using the Proton compatibility layer to run them under Linux, even though it is a Windows executable. I don't think there's going to be any problems with any of that. Twitch Prime, you get those like 10 free games every month. I'm sure you'll be able to just download them and run them, and they'll run in that compatibility layer as well. This thing will run pretty much everything. And then you can load Windows. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, you can boot into Windows and then run that stuff through Windows as well.
Absolutely. All right, Jacob Freed sent in a message. They said, what I want to specifically know is, can we install Origin, the Epic Games Store, etc., without having to wipe it and install Windows? It's been mentioned many times that we can install those, but it's always in the same breath as wiping it and putting Windows on it. I'd rather not have to do that and have all my game stores on the operating system that it came with. And I'm absolutely 100% with Jacob. I bought a Mac back when they first switched over to Intel chips. And the reason I got it was because I was using a Mac at school, at work, or at college, I mean. And I was like, this is really cool. I like the operating system. I like the way everything's working, but I also play video games. So I got a Mac and said, I'll dual boot
Right.
And dual booting always to me seemed like a huge pain. I'd be playing a game and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, now I got to switch over to my other operating system in order to do this other thing. Oh, I want to go back and play some of this. All right, switch back over. And it's always just kind of a hassle. So what do you think, Lloyd? Do you think you're able to install these things without it?
Yeah, I definitely think there is going to be the ability to do that. It's going to take a lot of the homebrew community to get this stuff working if it isn't already working. There's a launcher called Heroic Games Launcher, which basically is a command line interface, or sorry, a GUI for the legendary command line interface that is a Linux version of installing Epic Games stuff. So it's a command line version of the Epic Game Launcher, and then this is a graphical version that runs under Linux. So if for whatever reason you wanna get the free game of the week on Epic Games Store, you can install the Heroic Games Launcher. You can download that stuff, install it, and play it. And all this stuff will run natively under Linux, and then the games themselves will not run natively, but they'll use Proton to then run under Linux. And we got some really good news coming up for some of the more modern games that have like anti-cheat and stuff built in. There was a lot of questions about that leading up to I guess episode 6, because this is what the episode that we're in. So there's even good news about that. So yeah, this thing will be able to run almost anything. And if it doesn't at launch, there's going to be a lot of people doing homebrew and cobbling things together to make it work in the not too distant future from then.
Yeah, not only homebrew, but like I can't remember who from Valve said it off the top of my head, but they said something along the lines of, "We expect the games will run. If they don't, we consider that a bug and we will fix it." So, like they said that they're going to be very, very involved in that process of making sure that games will launch. It's up to the developers to say how well they'll run,
Right.
but Valve is going to be very involved in making sure that the games that you own launch on the system. Will it be 100%? I doubt it, but it'll be 99.9%, which is far more than we've ever had on a device like this. It's very, very exciting in my opinion. All right. Alan Court, they said, I would like to understand more about the suspend resume feature and how it will work. To my knowledge, this is the only feature that can't be done on PC and is new to gaming. So for those of you that don't know, or you've never used like a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation or an Xbox, you can be playing your game and then either on the Switch, just shut it off and walk away, or hit the home button on your PlayStation or your Xbox and put it into like suspend mode. And then when you come back later, your game is exactly where you left off without having to save, without having to do anything. It's really, really cool. And Valve said that they were going to try and do that. Lloyd, do you think we're going to get that at launch, or do you think that's going to be something that's going to come later on? And we're just guessing.
Well, I think it's going to be there at launch, because there's a button on your Steam Deck that is meant to do that. There's the little 3-dot button, I think is the button that it is, which kind of is like your Steam Deck's thinking about running a different game really fast. So that's what it does. And I kind of don't believe it exists, because this has never happened on a PC where you can just quit one game and start another one without waiting for 5 minutes. But Valve developer Pierre-Loup Griffet said to IGN, we all agreed early on that we needed that feature, that it would be a core part of how people experience the device. And as we've seen many other mobile platforms, that's how people use their phones. That's what they're used to. Press the button and everything comes back the way they left it. Most of the work was actually more on the lower level OS side in collaboration with AMD. We worked a ton on getting that stable, but it's rock solid now, and we're really happy where it's at. So apparently it works. This seems like
awesome.
This seems like magic voodoo, whatever else you want to call it. It doesn't seem like it should work. I can't wait to hit that button and see what happens, because that's going to be huge. I use it on my Xbox Series X all the time. I'll be in the middle of a game and I'm like, you know what? I want to go do one more level of this, and then I'll quickly switch to it and do that. I do it on my Nintendo Switch. Obviously, you can only really save and resume from the menu or go to the shop and things like that, but it's still nice to be in the middle of a game and say, hey, is there an update for my game? And pop to the store and see if that game is there. It's going to be huge to have it on Steam Deck. I just wonder how well it's going to work and how how seamless it really is going to be. Is it really going to be you hit a button, your menu comes up and you can launch another game, or is there going to be some time and more dots filling up on the screen as it's waiting for whatever the background tasks to finish?
Yeah, and not only that, but they've also talked a little bit about the idea. They said that they're still trying to figure this out, but being able to be playing your game on your high-end gaming PC and suspend your game and then pick up your Steam Deck and pick up right where you left off seamlessly.
Yeah.
Like if that happens, there's going to be people singing in the streets. It's going to be pandemonium, and
Yes.
I am very, very excited for it.
Exactly.
I'm going to mess this one up. Zendariel87. They sent in a comment. They said, question 1. Don't know if this has been covered, but can you boot the deck from micro SD? Personally, I would like to use the internal SSD completely for SteamOS and gaming and have a separate distro on the micro SD card for some light usage, like browsing the internet, drawing, streaming media, etc. So I'm not going to read the whole comment yet, unless you wanted me to hit all those before we jump into
No, that's
the
good.
response.
That's good.
Okay. So I think that this is a really, really good point, because there's a lot of people who keep saying you can just, wipe it and run Windows. But
Right.
most people, I think, are going to want this to just pick it up and work.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of completely wiping the operating system off of the device, that's scary to a lot of people. Maybe not you, but to a lot of people.
For sure.
And for those people, I've got good news. This leads us right into one of the big stories of the week, is that Valve put out this FAQ about all of the emails that Gabe Newell has been getting, because for those of you that don't know, he leaves his email open like a crazy man. And I mean, I sent him an email. He didn't respond, but I sent him one, and the question got answered in here. I'll tell you which one it was in a little bit. But the question that what was his name? Zendariel87 said, well, can you tell us about the BIOS, and does it allow dual boot? And they said multi-boot is supported. If you have multiple operating systems installed and choose which one to boot to, users will have access to the BIOS menu. That's huge. You turn it on, you hit the BIOS menu, I don't know, plug a computer in and press F2. I don't know. You push the button and it brings it up. Which operating system do you want to boot to?
Yeah.
That's really, really big for all those games that will only run on Windows.
Right.
That's absolutely huge. What do you think about this news, Lloyd?
I think that's great. We saw, was it Linus Tech Tips, I think, got into the BIOS. I think it was during one of those, one of the early videos where people had hands-on. They showed what the BIOS would look like. So it's probably going to be, you start the device and there'll be like a little thing, touch here to enter BIOS. So you touch the top left or whatever, you go into BIOS, but it's probably going to use something like Grub, which is a bootloader. So you'll be able to say this partition is bootable with Windows, this partition is bootable with SteamOS, this partition, which is on another piece of hardware entirely, is another Linux booter, and then that thing will pop up. You'll be able to choose which one you want, and provided that the actual thing's plugged in, if it's an external one, it'll boot into whatever OS that is. Pretty crazy that you'll be able to have a piece of hardware like this that you can install anything on. Usually hardware is so locked down when it's like a portable mobile gaming device, but this is going to be great for the people that have really specific needs. You have the one copy of this game that used to only run on 486s, and you need a specific version of Windows or a specific version of Windows DOS or Microsoft DOS rather to run it through DOSBox or whatever. You're going to be able to make whatever custom image you want, and it's just basically a restart and a finger tap away, I guess.
Yeah, that's really cool. There was a comment, I didn't grab it and throw it into the show notes, but there was a comment that I saw somewhere where somebody said, I wonder how it's going to run older games, because I think people like Lloyd and I, who are exceedingly aged, I would say that we've probably had like really, really old games and gotten newer hardware and been like, I'm feeling nostalgic for game X, and you install it on the new hardware, and it just runs way too fast, and it's unplayable. It's a nightmare, which is where things like GOG come in, because they kind of fix that stuff for you.
Yeah.
I think that that's all awesome, but the idea that you can just switch the BIOS out and change things up, and it gives you it gives you solutions to those weird edge cases, and that's what I think most people
Yeah.
when they think about the Steam Deck, they think about the weird edge cases
Right.
where we just want to know if it works, even if we'll never do it.
That's
Like
right.
I know that I'm never going to install Hearthstone on this thing, but it'd be nice if I knew that I could. You know
Right.
what I mean? I think
Right.
that's where a lot of people are getting these questions from.
Yeah, and we had a lot of questions about people asking about can we boot off an SD card? Can we do all that stuff? That's all in the FAQs. You can boot off an SD card. So you could buy, when Amazon has their stupid fire sales, and you can get a 128 gig SD card for $5. You could buy a dozen of them and install different sets of OSs and games, and you can be as crazy as you want. That is ridiculous. I'm really happy, because usually things like anywhere where you can put save games or data, usually they're super locked down, because that's how you get like homebrew. That's how you can pirate games. That's how you do all the stuff with a console. Well, this is a PC. You can do all that stuff on any PC if you want. If you want to copy games, do whatever, you can do it. I'm not saying go do it, because that's illegal, but do whatever the heck you want. Well, of course they're not going to lock out the SD card. That question shouldn't even been asked by myself, but of course it was, because it is so weird. And it's good to know that is going to be an option. So you'll be able to have a bunch of different distros. You could actually have like a RetroPie distro, but set to run on a different piece of hardware. So a fork of RetroPie that is just an SD card that you pop into the Steam Deck, and there goes all your emulators and fun old games and things like that. Just so many possibilities with this device. I really cannot wait to get my own and start hacking it apart and trying to break it.
Well, speaking of multiple possibilities, here's another possibility. What if you have one Steam Deck and multiple people in the house that want to use it?
Hacksaw.
Is that going to be an issue? And the answer is no, because right here it says, can you have multiple Steam accounts on one Steam Deck? It says yes, and this is just beautiful. It says each Steam account on the Steam Deck will have its own local save data and settings. So if I have a Steam Deck and my son wants to play a game on it, I can say, sure, I'll make him an account on there. He can sit down, he can play his game, he can play the game, and then his save isn't going to mess up my save.
Right.
That is really good, and I'm so happy that they addressed that.
100%. Yeah, that's really nice. That's just a nice feature that you generally wouldn't add to a device, because that would be handled by the OS. The OS would have like fast user switching and things like this. Hopefully it's a little bit more than that. So you go to a menu and you say, I'm not Bill anymore, I'm Bob, and now Bob has all these different settings compared to Bill. I'm really curious to see more of how the OS looks and performs. But yeah, some other really great stuff in the FAQs. A common question: will the Steam Deck UI replace big picture mode? And they've talked about it a few times, and in this in these FAQs it says that's what we're aiming for, but the rollout will happen in stages. So they're not going for shock and awe here to change the way everybody uses big picture mode already.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. This one is the question that I sent in to Gabe. So you're welcome for me asking it. Although I'm sure that there were thousands upon other people, thousands upon thousands of other people asking this question. Will the Steam Deck support external GPUs? And the answer is no. Disappointingly, external GPUs are not supported on Steam Deck. From my understanding, and I could be wrong because I am not a tech guy. I mean, I understand technology, but I don't get into the nitty gritty of that kind of stuff. Using an external GPU requires a faster bandwidth through the USB-C port. I think it has to be Thunderbolt 4 in order for that to work. I might be wrong about that. Maybe it's Thunderbolt 3.
Yeah,
Lloyd is holding up 3.
3 or 4,
so
depending.
Yeah, it's one of those. It doesn't matter. It's not in the Steam Deck. So look forward to a future version that has that. Whether or not you want to use an external GPU is another question, because sure, maybe you could hook up an external GPU, but would there be like throttling that would happen because the APU can't keep up with the external GPU that you've gotten? And maybe they've made that decision for you because they tested it a billion times. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
they're just holding something back for Steam Deck 2.
Right.
Are you disappointed in this, Lloyd, or are you thankful that you're not tempted to buy an external GPU?
It would be really sad if I bought this great portable gaming device so I could game on my couch and my recliner and in bed and on the bus and at the park, but then had to lug around a power adapter, a power cord, and an external GPU connected through a Thunderbolt cable. That would really not make it a very portable game system. It kind of sucks that it doesn't work, but I understand why it wouldn't.
Yeah, it would be nice to be able to do all of those things
Yeah.
that you're talking about. You're playing at 800p on like medium settings or something, and then you come home, you dock it with your external GPU, and it's like, oh, okay, well now you can play at 1440p on high settings or something because
Right.
you've got more hardware to power it. That would be really nice.
That would be great.
Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case, and I am very disappointed, although also glad that I don't feel the need to go out and purchase an external GPU.
Right.
We'll see if that ever happens in the future. This question we alluded to earlier. Can I run non-Steam games through Proton on Steam Deck?
Yep.
The answer is yes. That is really, really fantastic.
Yeah, that means old games that you have on floppy. If you can find some way to get a USB floppy hooked up to this device, you could probably run them. You could run pretty much everything. Any game, doesn't matter which store it's being installed from. For the most part, it will probably work on this device. Of course, there's anti-cheat and some other things that may get in the way. And I'm sure between Valve and the various other developers, they'll figure out solutions for these when they come to these problems. But yeah, it's really nice that you can run non-Steam games through Proton, and they've also come back and said that any modifications, any improvements to Proton are going to go back to the open source community. So making something work well on Steam Deck is actually going to make something work well on pretty much any other PC device down the road. Just it's pretty big of Valve to be doing stuff like this, giving back so much stuff to the open source community and releasing a piece of hardware that is so open. So good on them for that.
You know, the thing, and this isn't like I hadn't planned on talking about this, but I love that the number of people out there right now who are Linux gamers is a very, very small number.
Sure.
And that number come December is going to explode to a much, much higher number. And because it's going to increase so much, like I'm talking probably, I'm going to give Lloyd like some happy feelings right now, hockey stick proportions, because he's a hockey fan.
I am.
You're going to have so many more people gaming on Linux. It's going to motivate developers to target Linux. And this is really going to weaken what I would say would be Windows' stranglehold on the gaming space at this point. But
Sure.
that's not in the show notes. So anything you want to add to that before we move on to these supposed benchmarks?
No, that's about it. Everything in this FAQ is great. 10-finger multi-touch. How long is the charging cable? It's 4.9 feet, Bill. Just in case you were curious, if you could plug into the wall, there you go. And then they also went over again that Steam Deck will not be in retail stores. So a lot of good questions that we've been asked here on multiple videos that we've put out, multiple things that we've questioned on our shows. So it's good that this FAQ went up to kind of answer all those things.
Absolutely. All right. We know that there's a lot of people, like we mentioned anti-cheat before. We'll talk about that in a second. Tom's Hardware found somebody, it was in some other language, so I don't know who this was, but they got their hands on a Steam Deck. They're a dev, and they started testing some other games that they had and reporting on how the games ran. Now, it's funny because one of the things that comes along with one of the things in the NDA, from my understanding, is that the devs are only supposed to show their own games running. And that makes perfect sense because,
Right.
if let's say I'm a developer that makes game A and Lloyd is a developer that makes game B, my competitor, I could make his game look kind of crappy, and that wouldn't be a very cool thing to do.
Right.
So I totally get why they're doing that, but apparently this person did not get the memo, because over at Tom's Hardware, they've got some information. There's no images or anything, but they've got some information about how games ran. So starting with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, they said that the Steam Deck delivered an average frame rate of 30 frames per second on the highest setting. The reviewer claimed that he didn't notice any stutter in the gameplay. Dropping the graphics preset to high got the average frame rate to about around 36, and then they lowered the image fidelity even more, and they were able to manage to eke out 60 frames per second.
Yeah.
They didn't say which settings that they modified, but they were able to get Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which, if you ask me, is one of the most beautiful games ever, running on the Steam Deck at 60 frames per second. Did it have every bell and whistle turned on?
Right.
No, but you can play it wherever you are, and that's really compelling. What do you think about that, Lloyd?
Yeah, 100%. Like the just being able to just adjust the settings and your game frame rate doubled. That's great. Like that is something that we can't do on consoles normally. So this is going to be good. There's going to be tinkering. Anytime that you load up a new game, you're probably going to be playing with the graphic settings. PC gamers are used to that anyway. But this is really good. It shows that a modern-ish game at highest settings is getting about 30 frames a second, which was the floor that Valve really set for themselves. This is where we want things to kind of start at, and then adjusting settings up or down will adjust that as well, depending on if you're going up or down. Being able to get it at 60 frames a second is great, and I'm sure that all the settings that you've changed when you're playing on an 800p screen, you're not going to notice them as much as if you were playing it on a 4K screen. So so most gamers are probably going to want to crank down the visuals because you're not really seeing that fidelity on an 800p screen, because you want more frame rate, because frame rate just makes the game feel that much better.
Absolutely. They also got Doom running at 60 frames per second on medium settings. They also got Cyberpunk 2077, which is woefully optimized. They got that one running at around 30 frames per second. I think that was around medium or low settings.
Yeah,
that's really impressive. But I there's a lot of people out there who I think need the wake up call that they are expecting to buy this thing. They open it up, and it's the second coming, and everything runs at 60 frames per second. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. And you're going to have to, there are trade-offs with mobile gaming. The trade-offs are battery life, power, weight. And they have to take all of these things into consideration when they make this thing, so that it will work for most games. Now, is it going to run Cyberpunk 2077 at 60 frames per second? Absolutely not.
Yep.
It's not going to. But will you still be able to play the game? Sure.
Yeah.
Lower the settings, you'll get better results.
100%. My hope is, and we've been saying it since episode 1, we'd love it if developers customized their game for this piece of hardware.
Yes.
And hopefully it's seamless. Like, hopefully I get my Steam Deck the next day, a big game I'm excited for comes out. I'm not sure which game is coming out in December, and if I even get it in December or whatever, or January or February or whenever it's going to be. The next big game comes out, I install it. What I really hope happens is it says, oh, you're running on Steam Deck. We've optimized settings for this device. And that's it. Just a little pop-up on the screen. And I don't have to go into the settings. I don't have to see, okay, it's 30 frames. Okay, I'm going to adjust this slider down. Okay, it's 35. Okay, I'm going to turn VSync off. Okay, it's 40. Hopefully we don't have to do that. Hopefully new games that come out have been tested on this device, and they will just optimally run on the piece of hardware. But yeah, it's going to take a little bit of time for that to happen, if it even does happen. But I would assume developers want their customers to have the best experience on their hardware. And if they could target the Steam Deck with very little changes to their code, they're going to want to do that.
And we already have some devs that are doing that. We'll talk about that when we get to the dev pick, the tweets from devs in a little bit. So stick around for that. All right. I think that this is probably the biggest news of the week, and that is the anti-cheat updates. First off, for Epic Games, a direct competitor to Valve, to mention the Steam Deck on their website is, I think, a really, really big deal. It shows how much attention the Steam Deck has, that that Epic Games had to sit up and say, okay, we're paying attention. Don't worry, our stuff is going to work. And so
Right.
if you don't know what we're talking about right now, a lot of the games that don't run very well on Linux don't run very well because of anti-cheat software.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because when you are using anti-cheat software, which is a good thing, by the way, I don't like cheaters. Cheaters, go away. We don't like you. All right. When you're running anti-cheat software, it is looking in the background to see what processes are happening on this system. Is your computer intercepting anything and doing anything that it shouldn't be doing? And then when you use something like Proton, what happens is it intercepts a call from the game. It says, oh, this is the API that does this. Let me go get the corresponding API, because it's Proton is translation. Let me go get the corresponding API and translate that to Linux so Linux knows what to do. Linux then says, all right, I'm going to do that. And it works. But the anti-cheat looks at that thing that just happened and says, is that cheating? I think that's cheating. I'm shutting you down. So, like, we've all been kind of on pins and needles. Are Valve going to be able to get people like Epic to get the Epic anti-cheat system and people like BattleEye to toe the line and make their systems work on Steam Deck? And the answer is yes. Lloyd,
Yeah.
did I get any of that wrong?
No, that was great. Anti-cheat is it's a piece of software that'll run while you're playing a game, and it's looking for hardware changes, date and time changes, weird software stuff that's running, processes. Are you directly accessing memory that the game is loading, and loading data to and from? So it's looking at all these things. And when you're running under Proton, you may be your game may call something through DirectX that's like draw a triangle. But then Proton says, well, there is no compatible command to draw a triangle that's called draw a triangle. It's called draw a three-sided primitive. So it takes that draw a triangle thing and then it translates it into three-sided primitive. But then those calls may not be computationally exact. So when the anti-cheat software is expecting this update to take 2 milliseconds, but it takes 5 milliseconds, they're like, okay, someone's running something in the middle that is altering this data. So I can't even imagine the amount of heavy lifting that it took to get anti-cheat running under Linux directly, but also running under Linux through a compatibility layer. Like, those are two separate things. The amount of heavy lifting, the amount of developers that were working on this must just be just numerous. Like, this is a big lift to get this done, and it's done before the Steam Deck has even started shipping to us, the consumers. Developers have it, but it's happening before it even starts shipping to us, which I didn't think would happen. So this is a huge development.
It is. And on top of that, it just goes to, like, there's no way this happened. Like, when did they announce the Steam Deck? So we're on episode 6, so 12 weeks ago, roughly. They announced the Steam Deck 12 weeks. There's no way that this happens in 12 weeks.
No.
This has been something that they've been working on for a really, really long time.
Yep.
And they've clearly been working with Epic Games and BattleEye and everybody else on getting all of this stuff ready to have a smooth launch. Will the launch be smooth? We don't know, but I hope so.
Yep.
And it's absolutely going to be a lot smoother now that Epic Anti-Cheat supports Linux, Mac, and Steam Deck, as well as BattleEye also supporting those things as well. So this is huge news, and I think it's very, very good. Now, the CEO of BattleEye, Bastian Suter, he did tell The Verge, he said, the software BattleEye will be compatible with the Steam Deck. The first game might start using it soon, so it might actually happen before the Steam Deck launches. We may actually see games running on Linux with BattleEye before the Steam Deck even hits people's hot little hands, and I think that that's really cool.
Exactly. Yeah, this is huge, and like I said, I mean, we've had other portable gaming PCs before, and there's a bunch on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and you can go to Amazon and get these crazy knockoffs. But it wasn't until Valve, the big 800-pound gorilla in the industry, comes out and says, "Hey, we're making this thing. It's running Linux. And all of a sudden, everybody that makes games are like, oh crap. Okay, we either fix this now or we're going to have a million emails on day one, and this isn't good for anybody. So they heard about this before we heard about this, I'm sure. They started working on getting this working on Linux so that they don't have their customers complain that first person shooter X doesn't run, and I want to go play with my friends and stuff like that. Having this working prior to the Steam Deck's even shipping to consumers is, as I said before, just a fantastic development, and I'm super happy to hear it. Even though no one likes anti-cheat software, because it sucks that there's cheaters in the first place, that this has to exist. Yeah. Your games would run so much better if we didn't have cheaters, because they wouldn't have to have this piece of software running, taking CPU cycles for this stuff. But anyway, the real world that we live in, cheaters exist on PC. They need to have this anti-cheat software, and it's going to run on Linux. Just huge. I love that this is happening.
One of my favorite things, for those of you that don't know, we have a community Discord server. There is a link in the description down below if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. If you're not watching it on the YouTube channel and you're listening to it on your favorite podcast app, then head on over to nerdnest.tv. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel over there, turn on the bell and all the notifications and everything. But down below the video, there's a description, and in there is a link to our Discord server. And every single, every time I finish editing an episode of On Deck, I make a new thread that is for the next episode of On Deck, and people drop their links and their comments and their questions in there, in addition to as YouTube comments and stuff. And people kept dropping in these links to tweets from devs that have a Steam Deck in their hands, and they're showing off their games running on it. And this is what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Devs are like, listen, I want my game to ride those coattails of the Steam Deck, because everybody's talking about it right now. So if I can tweet out that my game runs on it, then my game might get a new lease on life, a new boost in sales,
right.
A longer tail, essentially. And we saw a bunch of them. And so we got one here from Mike Rose. He said, Valve sent over a Steam Deck. Thanks, lovelies. So I've been going through our games and checking whether or not they work without any additional dev on our part. Descenders works flawlessly. In fact, it runs incredibly well with ultra graphics on. I get around 50 to 60 frames per second, which is really, really good to hear. Definitely. And then Lloyd's going to love this one. Lloyd, you want to tell everybody about this one? Because you love this game.
Yeah, so Terraria plus Steam Deck, perfect combination for your adventures. This is from Terraria_logic on Twitter. Of course, this was posted in our Discord, and I said, whoa, Valve better not lock them out of Steam or the game will not ship, because we do a Stadia podcast, and that happened early on, where Terraria is supposed to come to Stadia. Then the devs developer accounts got locked, and they couldn't get a hold of anybody at Google, and they're like, I'm never shipping anything for Google again. And then quietly over the next 2 weeks, it's like, oh, it's coming, and then it launched shortly after. So that made me laugh that Terraria is one of the devs, or the devs of Terraria showed this off as one of the games running on Steam Deck. I want to play Terraria on my Steam Deck. I want to do it, so hopefully it runs well.
I'm sure it will. In fact, I can't find the image. I had seen this on one day, and it was an image. It was not a link to the actual site, but there was an image of like some text from, I think it was Terraria's website. And they said, we've got our hands on the Steam Deck. Terraria runs really, really well, but we're optimizing things, and we're customizing controls, and we're doing all of those things that you're supposed to do in order to make your game run best on a set of known hardware.
Right.
And I love the idea that they are customizing the controls to take into account that you have all of these other options. You know, I've played Terraria with mouse and keyboard. It works really, really well. I've tried it with controller, and I just felt like it was absolutely lacking.
Yep.
You played it a whole bunch on. Did you play it on controller when you were playing it?
Mouse and keyboard. I have played it with controller before on, I can't remember which console it was. It's not a good experience. I've played it with virtual controls on iPad back when it first came out. That was an okay experience. But yeah, I played through it all with mouse and keyboard, and I loved every second of it. I love Terraria.
Yeah. One of the devs and publishers, I think they're publishers. I can't remember now off the top of my head, that I really like. They put out a lot of games that indie games that I enjoy. They said, want some hot Steam Deck content? Here it is running Potion Craft Game, Cartel Tycoon, Skylands, and Despotism 3K.
Yeah.
But I don't know what any of those games are, but the fact that it's tiny build, that's very interesting to me because I like a lot of their games. So if you see tweets over on the Twitters and you see them and you're like, oh, look, here's a tweet of of a dev running games on Steam Deck. You know what would be awesome if you guys could do? If you could reply to that tweet and say, you should go on the On Deck podcast and talk about the Steam Deck with Bill and Lloyd, and mention us. I'm at Run Jump Stomp on Twitter, and Lloyd is at Dasme on Twitter. That's DASME. We would really appreciate it if you could get devs to check out our show, and maybe we could get them to come on and talk about what it's like making games with the Steam Deck in mind.
Definitely. Yeah, that was one thing that we loved doing when Stadia was in its pre-launch state. We talked to developers, we talked to heads of departments and heads of Stadia entirely. Did a lot of interviews. That was a heck of a lot of fun, and we got some great information out. We'd love to do it again. Tiny build, back to the tweet. Potion Craft Game, a really fun game. It was #1 on Steam for like the whole entire week after launch. So it's a popular game. You wouldn't know it by looking at the screenshots or watching the video, because it's very much looks like the little doodles you'd have in an old apothecary book or something. So yeah, having all these games running, and just like you Bill, whenever I see a new tweet from a developer, it just makes me smile that there's another Steam Deck in the world that is playing games, and it just means that when I get mine, all the games that I have are going to play better because developers will have had some time to mess around with them.
Absolutely. Well, everybody, that is it for this episode of On Deck. Episode 6 is in the can. We're all done with it. If there are things that you want us to talk about on the show, leave them in a comment below. And speaking of down below, there is a link. That link is going to take you to intotheam.com/nerdnest. That is where I got this shirt that I'm wearing right now. If you click on that link, you get 10% off your order as site-wide. And they've got not just plain t-shirts. I'm a boring guy, so I like plain t-shirts. They've got all kinds of stuff. I'm sure you saw it in the video earlier. But intotheam.com/nerdnest. Lloyd, you want to tell everybody goodbye before we get out of here?
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna say. Well, you covered it so great in that outro. But yeah, episode 6 is in the can. I can't wait for episode 7, because that means it'll be 2 weeks closer to when I can get my hands on a Steam Deck. Have a good one, everybody.